the father of the atomic bomb, schizophrenia, depression, and the love dramas of physicist Robert Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer, April 22, 1904, February 18, 1967, was an American theoretical physicist and nuclear physicist, widely known as the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, within the framework of which the first samples of nuclear weapons were developed during World War II. Because of this, Oppenheimer, along with S. Ulam and E. Teller, is often called the father atomic bomb. Robert Oppenheimer was born on April 22, 1904 in New York City. His parents emigrated to the USA from Germany at various times. Robert's father made a fortune importing fabrics. His mother was an artist. The Oppenheimers were very wealthy people who lived in the heart of New York, in a luxury apartment in Manhattan. Parents realized early on that their son was gifted. All roads were open to Robert. He could do whatever he wanted, and after the death of his parents, he received a substantial inheritance. Personal life. Robert Oppenheimer was not indifferent to girls with communist views. In 1936, he met Jean Tatlock, a medical student at Stanford University and the daughter of a professor of literature. John studied to be a psychiatrist and was a member of the Communist Party of the USA. Their relationship was stormy and officially ended by 1939, but for a long time, even after marrying and having children with another woman, Robert would continue to date Jean Tatlock. In August 1939, Robert Oppenheimer met his future wife, Catherine Kitty Pooney. She is a biologist and a member of the Communist Party. Before meeting Robert, Kitty was married 3 times, twice officially. At the time of meeting, she was married. Robert Oppenheimer and Catherine began dating despite her existing marriage. They married in 1940, after Catherine's divorce from her previous husband. They had 2 children, a son, Peter, and a daughter, Catherine. At the time, Robert was working on the Manhattan Project. Catherine and the children were living in Los Alamos, where the project was located. Catherine was active in the Communist Party and took part in political activities. However, after the end of World War II, Robert Oppenheimer began to fall under suspicion of having links with communist organizations. In 1954, during testimony before the Committee on Non-American Activities, he refused to answer questions about his ties to the Communist Party. This led to his withdrawal of security clearance and dismissal from Los Alamos. After this event, the life of Oppenheimer and his family changed. Catherine continued to keep in touch with the Communist Party and was under the supervision of law enforcement agencies. They moved to Princeton, where Robert accepted a position as a professor of physics at the university. Robert and Catherine remained together until his death in 1967. Subsequently, Catherine continued to be active as a biologist and psychotherapist, as well as engaged in charity work and environmental protection. At the end of the war, Robert Oppenheimer became a famous personality, and Kitty became very addicted to alcohol. She regularly got into car accidents and broke something for herself. The husband's fame and his affair on the side had a detrimental effect on the woman's health. She suffered from abdominal pain and used a lot of medications. Love and problems. Robert continued his relationship with psychiatrist John Tatlock, and because of this connection, the physicist had a lot of problems since Jen was a member of the Communist Party. The woman was under surveillance by the FBI. Her phone was tapped. Sad end. Robert's unofficial lover, John Tatlock, as a psychiatrist herself, suffered from clinical depression. Strange relationships, where a woman was on the sidelines, could have a negative impact on her already weakened psyche. Shortly before John committed suicide, Oppenheimer visited her. The news of this tragic event greatly affected Robert's inner demons. At the age of 14, Robert went to a summer camp. There he experienced severe bullying by boys. For his shyness and sensitivity, he received the nickname Cutie, which made him a target for harassment. Oppenheimer was insecure, as he described himself, a disgustingly good little boy. His childish, carefree life, surrounded by attention and excessive care on the part of his parents, did not prepare him for a meeting with reality, which is not always friendly. Robert looked at the world differently, as cruel and full of danger. As an adult, Robert was aware that his emotional state was deteriorating. One day his student friend came into the room and saw Oppenheimer rolling on the floor and moaning. It was clear that the future physicist was going through a severe depressive state. One day, Robert attacked his friend and tried to strangle him after the news that he was going to get married. Why he took this news in such a way and what caused his outburst of anger remains unclear. There was no doubt that Oppenheimer had deep psychological problems. During his college studies, Robert encountered a strained relationship with his teacher, experimental physicist Patrick Blackett. Because of the deep negativity he felt towards Blackett, Robert decided to poison the apple using dangerous chemicals from the laboratory. Then he put this apple on the teacher's desk. Fortunately, Blackett didn't eat the apple. However, what made the physicist commit such a terrible act, which in the worst case could lead to imprisonment and the destruction of his career? But Robert had to see a psychiatrist regularly. A psychiatrist who was engaged in Robert Oppenheimer's therapy diagnosed him with schizophrenia. At that time, the diagnosis sounded like dementia praecox, previously dementia. It was also noted that Robert is a hopeless case, and further analysis will do more harm than good. Bird and Sherwin, 2005. Later, the physicist began to experience panic attacks and anxiety, fainted. The poetic destruction began in the early morning hours, at 5:29 a.m. on July 16, 1945 in the Jornada del Muerto Desert in New Mexico. This explosion was given the code name Trinity by Robert Oppenheimer in honor of the Holy Trinity. This unusual name inspired the physicist to quote from a poem by the English poet John Donne, "Beat my heart, three people, God." Oppenheimer expressed it in his words, "This place, where the intense heat of the first human nuclear explosion turned sand into glass, will forever be known as the Trinity." Excerpt, The Creation of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, 1986. A 5-kiloton plutonium bomb known as the Fat Man, similar to the one dropped on Nagasaki, was chosen for testing the first device. Oppenheimer soon abandoned his terrible invention and regretted its creation. Throughout his life, Robert Oppenheimer suffered from depression and had a tendency to self-destructive behaviors, and was also addicted to smoking. He was described as a thin, nervous, restless, and impatient person. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize 3 times, but never received it. He created a weapon capable of destroying all living things. He was a brilliant but eccentric personality who suffered from psychological problems that did not prevent him from doing productive work. He lived and worked at a time when psychiatry was just beginning to develop, and the first antipsychotic drugs were invented only in 1950, and haloperidol appeared even 8 years later. If the great physicist really suffered from schizophrenia or from some inadequately diagnosed problem, one can imagine how difficult his emotional and psychological path was.